Hey, welcome to the CMO Whisper Show. I'm your host, Steve Olensky. Part marketing practitioner, part ad agency veteran, part journalist. I was a writer for Forbes for 10 years. I've had so many insightful conversations over the years with business leaders, to athletes, to celebrities, to, of course, CMOs. The only difference now is instead of sharing those insights through written form, I'm doing it this way. My guest today is Steven Fuld. As the former senior vice president of marketing at Sony Corporation of America, Steven led U.S. marketing efforts in collaboration with Sony's Tokyo headquarters and operating companies such as PlayStation, Sony Pictures, and Sony Electronics. His leadership spanned brand strategy and communications, enterprise marketing tech, and loyalty program design. His team defined Sony's brand positioning, managed paid and organic channels, and created compelling content to strengthen market relevance. He spearheaded the development of an enterprise-wide martech stack that unified customer data, enabling deeper insights, predictive modeling, and targeted audience activation. Additionally, he oversaw a cross-company loyalty program, including co-branded credit cards like the Sony card and PlayStation card, all designed to drive engagement and sales. Now, before Sony, Steven was managing director at the Kessler Group, specializing in loyalty program design and co-branded credit cards, and held roles in marketing and finance at Citigroup. He earned a BA in political science from Emory University. Now, after leaving Sony, Steven took off a few months to recharge and reset, and he is now actively pursuing roles that build on his experience of leading marketing teams, enabling transitions, and rolling up his sleeves to get involved in the practice of marketing. Steven Fuld, my brother, for those, we just met. What has it been, like 6 months?
6-7 months, yeah.
And this is a cliche, but we are absolutely long lost brothers.
Kindred spirits.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Really great to be here.
Yeah, for those, Steven and I have just clicked for sure. And we've had so many conversations. And like I said to him, now we're just going to record it, but let's just go.
Let's roll.
We have incredible conversations. And I want to start with something that's very special and very important to me. And I'm pretty sure it is to you. And I want to share with my audience something for the first time. And it has to do with imposter syndrome. And those not familiar, I just want to read a definition, if you don't mind. One definition goes like this. It's a behavioral health phenomenon that describes self-doubt about one's intellect, skills, or accomplishments. And I saw this stat, which blew me away. And according to Korn Ferry from this year, a survey, 71% of US CEOs experience imposter syndrome. So why am I bringing all this up? I'm bringing this up because I myself go through it, have dealt with it. Earlier this year, March, April, I was really, really down. I was very depressed, in a really dark place, and imposter syndrome played a major, major role in why I felt like that. And I want to share that with my audience for two reasons. One is just to share it. And two, because I want everybody to know that you're not alone if you're feeling that. And I know, Steven, you and I talked about this offline, if you will, and why I don't want to dwell on it too much. I want you to share your own journey.
Sure, absolutely. I'd like to just reflect on that time for you was when you reached out to me and we connected. And I think that was a really important part of the foundation of our relationship, because you were in a place where it didn't look like it from the outside, by the way, but it looked like you were open for change and evolution. And it's an incredible journey that you've had in the last 6 months on dealing with this thing that apparently 71% of CEOs deal with.
Yep.
So I spent the last 15 years working at Sony. I left officially at the end of September. I worked essentially nonstop since college, never taking more than a week or so off in between different roles, which is quite a long time. And I thought it was really incredible. And my wife was super supportive of taking a couple of months and kind of relaxing. And as Steve said in the beginning, sort of recharging and resetting. So here I am now, and I've started my process just really in the past 2 to 4 weeks in earnest. And it's an interesting process because I've never actually, I thought about it, I've never actually looked for a job. I was except my very first job, I guess, because I was always recruiting from the sort of the next firm directly at me. So it's a humbling experience if you've never had to position yourself, market yourself, explain yourself, essentially what we do for a living. But when you're doing it about yourself, you start having some level of self-doubt and say, can I do this? Did I really do all these things? Is that attributable to me? And it's a raw process, but I think it's a really healthy process to not believe your own BS, but sort of think through who you really are and what you really are capable of doing, and what's at the end of the day, what's important to you. So I think that it was fortunately for me, not an extended process, but I feel like from an emotional readiness standpoint, I'm in a really good place now. I think I have real clarity on what I think my strengths and skills are, my vision for my career over the next several years. So it's a bit of a cathartic process.
It really is. And I think, and again, I don't want to dwell on this too much, but the message I want to make sure gets through loud and clear is, if you're listening and you're feeling this way, you're not alone.
And I would even say, yes, and if you're at a company and you're working and you're sort of medium happy in your role or less than medium happy in your role, and you're fearing going out because of some type of imposter syndrome, deal with it. Realize that it exists, among many, many people, and figure out what you need to do to overcome it and find a friend.
It is. And the last thing I'll say is, and I will speak for you because I know
that's nothing new for us.
No, it's not. If you're listening to this, find someone to talk to. And if you can't find someone, reach out to me or Steven.
I'm with you.
Right. That's it. You're not alone. So I'll just end it with that. Okay. Pivoting, big pivot, but I wanted to make sure we got that across on this call, on this recording. Transforming legacy marketing organizations into agile, data-driven engines of growth. It's one of the things, talking points you gave me, and it sounds kind of very formulaic, but I want to put that into real terms of, because you took the legacy marketing organization of Sony and turned it into an agile, data-driven growth engine, right? Talk to us. The challenges had to be enormous to do that.
So yes, I'll give a couple of different examples of that. So first of all, from a loyalty perspective, because I did get recruited into Sony to initially start working on loyalty programs, and specifically across the different companies' loyalty programs. So there were not any independent programs within any of the individual businesses at that point. And there was a program that was, let's just say it was fledgling, and there was opportunity. So we did not have an organization that was really listening to the needs of the businesses, and specifically listening to what they would get out of a loyalty program, and have the ability to then design and build a program, and design and build a platform to enable the program, and design and hire an organizational team to help run that. So my first several years, really 5 years at Sony, was conceiving, designing, building, and then integrating the loyalty program, which was called Sony Rewards, into many parts of the business. PlayStation, having the largest sort of consumer base and the direct relationship, were the largest participants, but we did a lot of activities and integrations with Sony Pictures, and certainly with Sony Electronics as well. So that was the place, if you would, that I'll start with loyalty. And I think the most important thing that we did at that point in time that was a long time ago. It was 14, 15 years ago. And the Sony operating companies really were not working as collaboratively then as they are today. And a lot of times it was really just literally going to California, because I had to go to San Diego for Sony Electronics and Los Angeles for Sony Pictures, and then up to San Mateo for PlayStation, but really spending time in those offices, speaking to leadership teams, speaking to the marketing team, and really understanding what is it that how can you benefit from loyalty? And it was a lot of building relationships. It was a lot of building trusts. It was sort of small activities and small execution. We didn't come in with this gigantic program that was going to take over everything. And slowly over time, we built more and more opportunities for customers to engage with the respective brands of PlayStation or Pictures or Electronics, and ultimately drove their loyalty goals, whether that was repeat purchases, customer lifetime value, something related to brand. We really sat with the different marketing people at the operating companies and built from scratch for them. So in that case, we transformed a small organization that had existed before me, that I think was more focused on what they can do themselves versus what they can do with the operating companies. And it was building a knowledge and trust with the operating companies of what they really wanted to achieve. That was the large transformation on my sort of first step in the door at Sony.
Mm-hmm.
The second one I think that's worth highlighting for just 2 minutes or so is on the brand organization. When I was there for about 5 years or so, the woman who had run corporate marketing left the company, and I got those responsibilities in addition to my loyalty responsibilities. And one of the things that I realized as I looked around for the first 60 or 90 days is this organization really is focused on the past and not the future. There were really good quality people there, but I think we were focusing a lot more on sort of big brand awareness advertising, things in stadiums and the beautiful sign we had in Times Square, and lots of, I think the funnel doesn't exist anymore, but lots of top of funnel type of activities. And the reality is Sony does not have a brand awareness problem. We didn't then, we don't now. We have a brand relevancy problem, a lot more relevant today than it was, I'd like to say 7 or 8 years ago or 8 or 9 years ago, I should say, when we really started on the transformation of the marketing organization. So we really looked towards, in terms of transformation, we really looked towards the roots of Sony and the history of Sony, and importantly as well, the sort of the identity and the corporate direction of Sony. So when you look at the identity of Sony, it took till about 2018 or 2019, but we thought about how, and this comes directly from the CEO office, how we want to be known from an identity point of view. And we wanted to be known as a creative entertainment company with solid foundation of technology. That was a really big statement. Now, that's not a consumer-facing statement. That's a statement to inspire and direct marketing teams to tell stories tied to that creative entertainment company identity. And a corporate direction, which ties right in with the identity, was getting closer to people. So you could imagine with a company that we're really trying to drive relevance of the brand and trying to make sure people understand who we are and what we are, the identity and the direction, it really gave us a platform to say, you know what, we're going to transform the budget. We completely shifted from analog to digital. We're going to shift our audience and who we're going after. We're going to shift, obviously, our channels and how we're going to measure success in those channels. So every facet of brand, obviously, we're going to change our content creation. So every facet of brand strategy, brand comms, brand social, all got flipped completely around in that time frame.
So you mentioned the navigational of this massive organization. Talk to us about the challenges of getting the alignment right of everybody.
Yeah, it's massive, but there was really 3 different vectors that I thought about. Sort of vector 1 was my leadership, which sat in Japan. I was the global head of brand. The second vector is the operating companies and the people at the operating companies that would give us permission to use their content and to communicate the brand to their audiences. And then third was my team. And ultimately, I really started with the team because I needed the team for their capabilities, for their intelligence, of course, for their hard work, and to really be on board about the type of transformation we're trying to do. And if they really all kind of bought into it. Most did, some didn't. We did a little bit of cleaning house and adding some resources as necessary, but it was, I think we probably kept about 70% of the people and replaced about 30% of the people in that sort of transition because they just weren't really wanting or desiring to sort of come on board with the new approach. Once we sort of figured out our own internal sort of our family within, if you would, then we started working with the different operating companies. I was informing my leadership sort of a little bit at a time about what we were doing. But then we started working with some of the operating companies to really say, this is what the brand stands for. To some of the companies, the brand really matters a lot, like to Sony Electronics or to PlayStation. For a consumer that's going to go to the movies or listen to a song, I have to say it doesn't matter a whole lot to them. Although both Sony Pictures and Sony Music care a lot about their creators, and having the brand being relevant to their creators is also an important part and an important stakeholder. So once again, established a direction with our team, aligned with the operating company, leadership teams, marketing teams. Then we sort of had some momentum to go to Tokyo and to talk to them and incorporate their thoughts, their concerns, what they thought is their opportunities, our opportunities, I should say, in the US market. And then obviously we were running brand social at that time. So social is social, so it's everything relevant.
Right. Now, I want to take what you just said, and you mentioned the word storytelling earlier, and you and I have talked about this ad nauseum offline, how we both believe very strongly in the power of storytelling. But talk to us about how heretofore, when you started this kind of journey, if you will, to get the brand to do more storytelling and make it audience centric in this social digital age we live in, what was that challenge like? What were some of the examples of the way you were able to do that?
Well, it's funny. There's two different types of storytelling here. There was one storytelling on the strategy and what we were trying to do, and make sure that we were telling a clear, distinct story of why do we have to focus on relevance versus awareness? Why do we have to leverage the content that we have versus going outside? Why do we need to focus on a specific audience? How are we measuring, and why is that the right way to do it? And being able to tell those stories and to not in a 50-page deck, but in a 20-minute conversation. A lot of times I would show up at the meetings and I would have my beautiful slides ready to prepare. But you know what? Everyone sees 100 or 200 slides a day. It's much better to sit down and have a conversation. And that's what I generally did. Showed a lot of slides as well, but that's a lot of it was through storytelling. The second part of storytelling, I think, Steven, is what you were alluding to, which is really from a brand content perspective. Mm-hmm. The reality is, as I said before, Sony's a creative entertainment company, and we weren't really telling those stories. So what we did is we looked at other companies that are using content and how are they using content to tell stories. And at the end of the day, you really want to be in a cultural conversation, right? You want to take the amazing talent that is truly associated with Sony and leverage that content to help tell our stories about who Sony is today as a creative entertainment company, as a company that genuinely cares about creators and wants to get closer to creators and enable creators. So what we did is we worked with the operating companies, obviously. Electronics has beautiful content. Sony Pictures and PlayStation obviously has beautiful content. You can imagine what we could do with the Sony music. And over time, and we got better at this, on day 2 than we were at day 1 and so forth, is we really tried to tell nice, tight, compact stories appropriate for social. And we were trying to associate the Sony brand. Once again, everybody knows what it looks like. Everybody's heard of it. We're like a 98% unaided awareness, something like that. Mm-hmm. And really present the brand at the intersection of technology and culture, not in a forced way. People are smart. Once they see Sony there, they'll figure out over time. We don't have to shove it down their throat. And over time, we really saw a tremendous lift in our brand relevance. And I could talk about the measurement factors and how we did that later on. But Good, Steve, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, do it while it's fresh in your mind. I'd love to hear, and I know my audience would too.
So what we really wanted to do was isolate how effective our activities and our spend are. To measure brand, there's a global brand study that Sony's been doing for decades. That is not the right way to pick up. Obviously, you will pick it up to some degree, but that's not the right way to really pick up your activities and your spend. So since we had this new brand communications approach and this new content approach, what we really wanted to do was match it up with our new audience approach. So we defined an audience of about 40 million people in the United States that we wanted to communicate the brand to. That was could have been bigger, but that was dictated by budget. And we really wanted to figure out, if we communicate to these people over time, in addressable paid media, and we know that we're communicating to them at least twice a month, can we actually get a change, a shift, an incremental difference in what we called the Sony fan score? And the Sony fan score was just, if you think about it, the x-axis was brand love, the y-axis is brand sentiment. Mm-hmm. So the people that have a higher level of brand love, they can even like us a lot, but the higher level of brand love and a higher brand advocacy, we sort of push them to the up and to the right on that chart. And what we did is every single thing we did a universal control. So we always held out of that 40 million 1.5 million or 2 million people. I forget the exact number. And really, every time we measured our results, we didn't measure the general sentiment or the tide, if you would, of Sony going up and down. We really measured the efficacy of our spend and our stories and how that separated from the non-targeted group, the holdout group. So, and it doesn't show a lot after a quarter, after 2 quarters, but we did this for 4 or 5 years, and you really saw a tremendous separation of the target group versus the holdout or control group.
So let's talk holistically here for a second. I'm staying in brand storytelling, by the way. Off the top of your head, I give you, what are the do's and don'ts for brands when it comes to storytelling?
I think the do's are absolutely, you have to know who you are as an organization, and the brand should always represent. That's why I keep on coming back to the corporate identity and the corporate direction. The brand has to keep coming back to your foundation. It's the roots of your tree, if you would. Now, sure, you can stretch out and you can push past that and sort of play and see how far you can go. But at the end of the day, foundationally, you have to tell a story that makes sense for your brand. Secondly, I think it's incredibly important that you speak honestly, truthfully, and don't overhype the brand. You are who you are, particularly when you're trying to focus on brand relevance. With brand awareness, you can do some crazy stuff because people want to, quote unquote, be seen. We were fortunate enough that we didn't have to spend our money on those big, promotional activities that sort of just get people to understand who the brand is. Mm-hmm. I think, but the brand, to me, at the end of the day, we understood what our KPIs are. And we knew that we wanted to drive the Sony fan, the intersection of brand love and brand advocacy. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of, I think that's a best practice, if you would, as well, or a do, as you just asked me. We really understood the KPIs that would incent the team, the content team, plus the media team, to build the type of content that was going to drive the relevance that we wanted out of Sony. So it was a very thoughtful set of objectives that we set for the team, and we, of course, move the goalposts every year to make it a little bit harder, but they did a fantastic job sort of chasing that down.
I think that, I was just going to say, reiterate what you just said, because it's so important. I think it gets overlooked, is setting those goals, KPIs, whatever metrics, pick a term, and having realistic but aggressive, right? Which may sound counterintuitive, and then move them every year. Like you said, move the goalposts, but establish those first.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. I can't give the exact numbers away, but our cost per acquisition of the Sony fan over the first 2 years went down about 75%.
Wow.
Because the teams got smart. We didn't know a whole lot in the beginning. We didn't know exactly what the right audience was. We didn't know the cadence that we needed to communicate, how far in between the different flights. We didn't know the audience well enough to know, there's different IP audiences that would like one thing or another, and how do we identify them, and how do we sort of build propensity models against those so we're spending our money in the right places. So we were sort of firing on all cylinders on figuring it out and driving those costs down.
Right. And constantly monitoring and analyzing. Constantly.
Yeah. With math geeks.
Exactly. So you've built and managed high performance teams, right? It's clearly you've done that. Give some tips, people listening. How do you do that, especially constantly evolving landscape? How do you build and maintain these high performance marketing teams?
The people are everything. I know we're going to talk at the end about the future, and I'm sure we'll talk about AI a little bit. Yep. But as of now, the people are everything. Yes, you need your tools, you need your processes, you need your measurement systems, et cetera. But the people are everything. So if you want to build a high performance team, you have to make sure, obviously, you have to have a certain quality of people, but more than the quality of the people, obviously a base level is important, is the alignment and understanding of what you're trying to achieve. And alignment and understanding to some people means the boss talks and everybody understands. That's not the way it really works in the real world. And alignment and understanding is, I may share our direction, but then it's game time. Now it's time to sort of listen to the respective experts in their areas and say, that will never work because of this, or I don't understand why you're going that way. So to me, it's a very open, inclusive, almost evolving process to really kind of get it right. And the get it right can be, get it right on the content, get it right on the audience, get it right on exactly how we're measuring. There's a lot of things to kind of get it right on. And if you want a high performing team, you've got to sort of, particularly when you're doing something pretty brand new, at least for us, it was pretty brand new. I'm sure lots of other people have these similar experiences, but it was really getting them on board. And then it was almost like so much fun to go to our weekly meetings and talk about performance and what was happening because people were on board. I'm not pretending everything was perfect. And we certainly had some people that kind of spun out a little bit and said, I don't understand what we're doing. And that's okay. But in general, having those, they weren't even tough conversation. I look at them as good conversations up front, as well in the sort of early planning phases, makes a ton of sense. And then we had a very structured, disciplined process. We had several people that we brought over the years from American Express. And they are just so beautifully classically trained that, when it's time for a quarterly planning meeting, it's like, the agenda gets written, the slides get developed, the meetings happen, and it's just, they are so good at sort of the discipline and practice of marketing. And frankly, I learned a lot from them as well.
And interesting. Okay, you must have peeked at my notes because you know what the last topic is. Before we get to some fun, which I didn't even tell you about yet, so I have a fun way to end this episode. But let's put your forecasting hat on, AI, of course, but the future, next year and beyond for marketing, trends, predictions. Go. What comes to mind?
I mean, it's the ultimate crystal ball that nobody really has.
Yep.
Okay, let me state first that I'm not going to even address what's going to happen with AI agents because I have no idea. I will tell you that once you have an agent and I have an agent, I never actually have to talk to you anymore, Steve, because the agents can talk to each other and that will be much better. Yep. But in all seriousness, it's going to be a beguiling, fascinating time. And I think it's coming. It's not like, this is going to come in the next couple of years. I think it's coming like Q1 next year, right? So it's right around the corner. How brands are going to respond to or be proactive in reaching out to prospects or customers or whatever, wherever on the spectrum you are in the relationship with the brand. I think it's going to be, it's hard to predict. I would just say there's going to be more. There's going to be more relationships. There's going to be more interaction. There's going to be more personalization. There's going to be more ways to get customer service. It's going to be more. And I think that brands have to really think about how those agents are going to add fuel to the fire. I think it's mostly good. I think we're all have a little bit of, cynicism and we're watching and making sure everything, turns out okay. But I think it's going to have profound impact on the business. Now, outside of agents, which I'm basically saying, I don't have a playbook and understand. I think there's some really interesting things going on with AI now already. So first of all, there's a lot of places where it's already impacting marketing. Workflow simplification, content creation, unlocking insights, personalization, measurements, and operations. All of those areas, everyone's not doing everything, but a lot of companies are starting to go from, a little bit cynical, kind of looking at it and saying, do we really want to do this, to putting up some use cases and starting, in the market and doing things. And so I think those 5 pillars, if you would, are definitely moving along. But I think it's bigger than that, in that I think instead of thinking about how should we utilize AI to enhance the performance of our marketing, I think we have to think about the business strategy and how should AI augment human talent and creativity much more than just driving efficiency. Driving efficiency is great, and there's a place for it, and it's important. I'm not going to walk away from it. But to me, the opportunity is the augmentation of human creativity, not the replacement, because I don't know what AGI looks like, but I think we're a ways away from that. I don't think we're going to replace human creativity, but the embracing of the change of business models. There's a lot of writings, and I do a lot of reading, as you do, Steve, out there about how it's going to change brands from being sort of luxury brands and sort of lower level brands, and the whole middle will get bifurcated, if you would. That's a really interesting hypothesis. I think there's a lot of merit to it. I don't know if that's going to be right or not, but AI is going to make knowledge free. That's a crazy thing when you think about how many people are knowledge workers. But AI is going to make knowledge free. So the internet, when it started in the 90s, reduced the cost of information distribution. Now we're reducing the cost of knowledge. That's sort of profound. So I think that there are going to be Many, many, many more companies, because I think that large companies will still, many large companies, some won't obviously, but many large companies will embrace and be effective. I think there's going to be many, many, many more consumer choices and many, many more sort of empowered companies that look like a company today that would take hundreds of people, that maybe there's just a handful. So I think there's a lot of change going on, not just the market.
Right. No, obviously. I mean, you'd be naive to think it was just affecting marketing, clearly. Okay. You don't know this is coming. So maybe like a month or two ago, I started this new part of my show called the Random Five, where I ask my guests 5 very random questions so the audience can get to know you better as a person.
Shoot.
Okay. Number 1, if you weren't in marketing, what other career path do you think you would have pursued?
It wasn't in marketing. What career path? Something in the fitness world, probably.
Okay.
Something, I don't know if I'd want to own a gym, but something in the fitness, better health space.
Okay. Next, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, living or dead, who would it be and why?
Jesus Christ.
Why?
Because his teachings, his impact, even though his impact was obviously much greater after he died, or hundreds of years after he died. I mean, one of the most profound figures of all time, and it just seemed like he'd be just a fascinating, soulful person to talk to.
Okay. Tell us about your morning routine when you first get up. Do you check social, news, phone, email? Phone, email. What do you do when you first get up?
So I'll actually go back a little bit earlier. So when I get in bed, I do charge my phone next to me, but I'd like to say never, but I barely ever use my phone in bed. I certainly don't wake up and open the phone. If I wake up, I'm out of bed and I'll take my phone with me. I usually get up 5:45 to 6 o'clock, and I do 10 to 15 minutes of meditation while the coffee is brewing. And then I go right into reading. I try to read primary sources. I don't want somebody to push the news to me. I want to read my newspapers online. I want to read a magazine or two online. I want to read Substack, and then I want to check social as to what's going on. Now,
gotcha.
It's a little bit different because when I worked for Sony, I did check my emails first just to see what anything came in from Japan. So that's a little bit of a tweak.
Right. Of course. It's going to vary. That part's going to vary. Okay. Is there a book, movie, or song that has deeply influenced you?
I just read Albert Brooks's From Strength to Strength.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone that's 45 or older, it's an incredible book about the second half of your life and how to literally go from strength to strength. I mean, we change every decade, our 20s and 30s and 40s. And now for me in my 50s, I mean, you change a lot.
Yep.
But it's not all bad. And there's some really, really interesting wisdom in that book. So that's not necessarily the most profound thing I've ever read, but it's something I read a couple months ago. It was fantastic.
Okay, fair enough. Last question. Do you have a motto or mantra that you live by?
Steve O. I keep on saying that, and that calms me down.
Okay, now be serious.
If you need to edit that one, you can, Steve.
Exactly.
I mean, I think the mantra is it's not my line, so I feel kind of cheap using it. But do the right thing even when nobody's watching.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no wrong answer in it. Right. Look, there's a thing about cliches. I always say there's a reason they became a cliche because there's only people said them.
I'm with you.
So listen, for those not familiar with me and Steven, we could literally keep talking for hours.
Can't believe we're done. I'm so sad.
We're going to do a part 2, a part 3. I know we are. And plus we talk every day anyway. My brother, I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. It was really a lot of fun.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the CMO Whisperer Show. I hope you shared this episode with your friends. And if you have not already, please subscribe to be kept up to date on all the latest episodes. And if you're so inclined, leave me a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you.